Welcome, dear listener, to a quiet corner of history, a gentle journey into the past, designed to lull your mind into a state of deep tranquility. As the day's concerns begin to fade, allow your thoughts to softly settle, much like dust motes dancing in the last rays of sunset. Tonight we will embark upon a tale that unfolds across the vast and ancient lands of China, a story of transformation, of deep currents beneath the surface of a changing world, observed through the eyes of one man, whose path was intertwined with the destiny of a nation. Let your breath become slow and even, your body heavy and comfortable, as we begin this peaceful exploration. Our story begins in a time long past, on a cold December day in the waning years of the 19th century, precisely in the year 1893. Imagine a small, tranquil farming village, nestled serenely amidst the verdant rolling hills of Hunan Province. This was Shiaoan, a place where the rhythms of life were dictated by the seasons, where the earth provided sustenance, and where generations had lived in close harmony with the land. It was within this quiet pastoral setting that Mao Zedong first drew breath, a new soul entering a world on the cusp of profound and dramatic change. His father, a man of determination and resilience, had known a life of hardship, starting his journey as a poor farmer, toiling tirelessly under the vast Chinese sky. Yet, through sheer grit and unwavering effort, he had gradually, patiently worked his way upwards, transforming his fortunes, evolving from a struggling tiller of the soil into a respected landowner and a shrewd grain dealer within the community. He was a man deeply rooted in the practicalities of the earth, a man who understood the value of hard labor and the tangible rewards it could bring. And so it was only natural that he held strong expectations for his young son, envisioning a future where Mao would follow in his footsteps, contributing diligently to the family's farm and the burgeoning business, upholding the traditions of their ancestors and securing their prosperity. However, even in his earliest years, young Mao possessed a spirit that yearned for a different kind of nourishment, a different pathway through life. While the fields offered their endless tasks, Mao found himself drawn with an almost magnetic pull to the silent, captivating world held within the pages of books. He would devour them, absorbing their stories and their wisdom with an insatiable hunger. His imagination would soar through the epic tales of ancient Chinese emperors, whose reigns shaped dynasties and whose decisions echoed through centuries of history. He would lose himself in the narratives of rebellious heroes, their courage and defiance sparking a quiet fire within his young heart. And his mind would wander, transported by the vivid descriptions of faraway lands, cultures and philosophies, far beyond the gentle hills of Shiaoan. This deep, abiding love for reading, this quiet pursuit of knowledge, often brought him into gentle yet firm clashes with his father. For the elder Mao, the tangible reality of the farm, the pressing demands of the family business, the daily necessity of physical labor, held paramount importance. He saw little practical value in the abstract world of books, when there was always real, undeniable work waiting to be done in the fertile fields, under the watchful gaze of the sun. This early, quiet tension between a practical father and a contemplative son was, in a subtle yet significant way, a quiet foreshadowing of the larger, more intricate conflicts that would gradually unfold throughout Mao's remarkable and complex life. It was during these formative years that a particular dual perspective began to gently shape Mao's understanding of the world around him. He felt a profound, almost innate connection to the poor farmers who were his neighbors, their lives interwoven with the cycles of planting and harvest, their struggles etched into the very soil they worked. He observed their daily hardships, their quiet resilience, their deep-seated desires for a life of greater security and dignity. Yet at the same time, he was the son of a man whose diligent efforts were steadily elevating their family's status, accumulating more land and more wealth than many of their village peers. This unique position, straddling the worlds of relative prosperity and widespread poverty, offered him a perspective that few others possessed. He witnessed the intimate struggles of the common people up close, understanding their silent grievances, their unspoken hopes. But crucially, he also had access to something that most village boys could only ever dream of: the opportunity to receive an education, to open his mind to ideas and knowledge far beyond the village confines. And so, at the tender age of 16, a significant moment arrived, a quiet turning point in his young life. He made the momentous decision to leave the familiar comfort of his home village, to bid farewell to the traditional world he had always known, and to venture forth to attend a modern school situated in a nearby city. This was no small step. It was a profound leap into the unknown, a passage from the tranquil rhythms of rural life into a new, bustling environment. This city was alive, vibrant, and resonating with a different kind of energy, a place where radical ideas were quietly germinating, where a palpable sense of crisis regarding China's future hung in the air, stirring the minds of young intellectuals. Within the hallowed halls of this new school, Mao was akin to a thirsty sponge, eagerly soaking up every drop of knowledge that came his way. His mind expanded, absorbing new thoughts and theories about politics, delving deeply into the intricate tapestry of history, and contemplating the profound questions posed by philosophy. He was, in essence, preparing himself, quietly and diligently, for a future that was yet to be revealed, a future that would demand both intellect and an understanding of the vast currents of change sweeping across his homeland. To truly comprehend the intricate journey of Mao Zedong, to understand the motivations that would later shape his momentous decisions, we must first gently cast our gaze upon the China into which he was born, a land of ancient grandeur grappling with an unprecedented sense of uncertainty and profound crisis. For centuries, China had stood as a vast and magnificent empire, a beacon of civilization, its people holding a deep and abiding pride in their rich cultural heritage, their long and illustrious history. However, as the early years of the 20th century dawned, that centuries-old pride had been tragically shattered, replaced by a growing sense of vulnerability and humiliation. The ruling Qing dynasty, which had held the reins of power for generations, was now weak, its authority crumbling from within, unable to withstand the relentless pressures from without. Foreign powers, emanating from distant lands in Europe, from America, and from neighboring Japan, had systematically carved up parts of China for themselves, imposing what were known as unequal treaties. These treaties granted them control over vital ports, lucrative trade routes, and significant territories, effectively diminishing China's sovereignty and reducing its once formidable status on the global stage. This period, often referred to as the Century of Humiliation, deeply wounded the national psyche and cast a long shadow over the lives of ordinary people. For the vast majority of China's population, life was an immense hardship. They were predominantly peasants, their lives intimately tied to the land. They inhabited small villages, cultivating tiny, often insufficient, plots of land. Their very existence was precarious, constantly at the mercy of the unpredictable forces of nature. Devastating droughts that withered their crops, catastrophic floods that swept away their meager possessions, and recurrent famines that brought widespread suffering and death. Adding to their plight were the heavy burdens of exorbitant taxes and cripplingly high rents demanded by landlords, trapping them in a relentless cycle of poverty from which escape seemed almost impossible. Furthermore, with the central government's authority weakened, various warlords had risen to power, carving out their own regional domains. These warlords, with their private armies, were locked in constant brutal conflicts, their incessant battles tearing through the countryside. Their armies marched across the land, bringing devastation and instability to the already struggling populace. This was the deeply troubled, fractured, and often desperate China that Mao Zedong observed and experienced as he grew into a young man, a land crying out for change, for unity, for a restoration of its former strength and dignity. These were the foundational experiences that quietly shaped his nascent worldview, fostering within him a deep-seated desire to alleviate the suffering of his people and to forge a new path for his ancient nation. As a young man filled with a quiet intellectual fervor, Mao Zedong eventually made his way to Beijing, the venerable capital city, which at that time pulsed as the very political and intellectual heart of China. It was a city alive with ideas, where the brightest minds of the nation congregated, debated, and dreamed of a different future. There Mao secured a humble yet pivotal position as a library assistant at Peking University. While his official role might have been minor, seemingly inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, it strategically placed him right at the epicenter of the most exciting and profound debates of the era. He found himself quite serendipitously surrounded by the nation's most brilliant minds, students with their boundless idealism, and professors with their deep reservoirs of knowledge. This was a place where theories were exchanged, where ideas collided, and where the very future of China was being quietly yet intensely reimagined. It was within the hushed, hallowed atmosphere of this university library, amidst the countless volumes of human thought, that Mao first encountered the groundbreaking theories of Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. He delved into the radical concepts of class struggle, the transformative power of revolution, and the bold vision of creating a communist state. These ideas, resonating deeply with his own observations of the immense suffering and inequality prevalent in China, ignited a spark within him, offering a potential framework for understanding and perhaps changing the harsh realities he had witnessed since childhood. Mao was present in Beijing during a truly monumental event, a quiet storm that swept across the nation, the May 4th movement of 1919. This was not merely a protest, it was a massive, spontaneous outpouring of student activism, a powerful demonstration of national sentiment. It emerged as a direct and passionate challenge to the government's perceived weakness, its inadequate and deeply disappointing response to the Treaty of Versailles. This treaty, designed to conclude the First World War, had made a grave error in handing over German-controlled Chinese territories directly to Japan, a deeply humiliating blow to China's national pride. The May 4th movement was a profound turning point for countless young Chinese, and certainly for Mao. It served as a stark and undeniable confirmation that the existing government was utterly hopeless, incapable of defending China's interests or upholding its dignity. It crystallized the growing conviction that a more radical, more decisive course of action was not just desirable, but absolutely necessary to rescue their beleaguered nation. In the year 1921, a small yet historically momentous gathering took place. Mao Zedong was one of roughly a dozen determined individuals who met in profound secrecy within the unassuming walls of a girls' school in Shanghai. Their purpose was audacious, their vision revolutionary: to formally found the Communist Party of China. At that tiny clandestine meeting, huddled together, none of them could have possibly imagined the extraordinary trajectory that this fledgling group would embark upon, how it would one day rise to rule the world's most populous nation, shaping its destiny for generations to come. In the nascent years of the Communist Party of China, the party's direction was largely guided by instructions emanating from the Soviet Union. The Soviets, deeply rooted in their own revolutionary experiences, firmly believed that a successful revolution should originate in the industrial cities, with the factory workers, the urban proletariat, at its vanguard. This was their established doctrine, their tried and tested path to socialist transformation. However, Mao, with his unique background and deep personal connection to the land and its people, began to quietly develop his own distinct set of ideas that diverged significantly from the Soviet blueprint. Drawing upon his intimate upbringing in the vast rural expanses of Hunan Province, his own observations of peasant life, and his profound understanding of their enduring struggles, he argued passionately that the true wellspring of revolutionary power lay not with the relatively small number of city workers, but with the immense, long-suffering, and deeply oppressed peasant population. He did not merely theorize from afar. He dedicated himself to immersing himself in the countryside, spending invaluable time among the farmers. He meticulously studied their lives, listening intently to their grievances, their unspoken resentments, and their fervent hopes. He began the painstaking, quiet work of organizing them, patiently building networks of support and solidarity. His meticulous reports, born from direct observation and deep empathy, articulated a compelling vision. If the communists could successfully win the unwavering support of the peasantry, they would become an unstoppable force, a mighty, irresistible storm, as he eloquently put it, sweeping all before it, transforming the very fabric of Chinese society. This radical focus on the peasantry, a departure from orthodox Marxist thought, inevitably placed Mao at odds with some of the other leaders within the Communist Party of China. Many regarded his ideas as unorthodox, a deviation from the established revolutionary path. Yet Mao's profound practical experience on the ground, his undeniable connection with the rural people, and his innate ability to understand and articulate their aspirations, proved remarkably effective. He mastered the art of speaking their language, truly understanding their concerns, and translating them into a clear call for action. He organized them into nascent unions and formidable militias, and in doing so, he promised them the one thing they yearned for above all else: their own land, a patch of earth to call their own, a promise that resonated deeply in the hearts of millions of landless peasants. The 1920s and 1930s were a period of intense and often brutal conflict across the sprawling landscape of China. The Communist Party had initially, and somewhat pragmatically, formed a fragile alliance with the much larger nationalist party, known as the Kuomintang, which was led by the charismatic figure of Chiang Kai-shek. This alliance, born out of a shared, though often uneasy, goal of unifying China and resisting foreign encroachment, was always fraught with suspicion. In 1927, that fragile truce shattered with terrifying suddenness. Chiang Kai-shek, fearing the growing influence of his communist allies, unleashed a devastating betrayal, known as the Shanghai Massacre. In a swift and brutal campaign, thousands of communists were rounded up, imprisoned, and ruthlessly executed, decimating the party's ranks. This sudden violent turn of events forced Mao and the surviving members of the Communist Party of China to flee for their lives, to seek refuge in the remote, rugged, mountainous countryside of Chiang Kai Province. It was in this isolated, difficult terrain that they established a small, self-governing communist state, often referred to as a Soviet. Here, far from the reach of the nationalist government, they began to put their radical ideas about land reform and peasant government into practical application, creating a vital base for their burgeoning revolutionary army. However, Chiang Kai-shek and his powerful nationalist government were utterly determined to eradicate this communist threat entirely, to wipe it out completely and decisively. They launched a series of massive military campaigns, deploying hundreds of thousands of soldiers to encircle the communist base in Jiangxi. The pressure mounted relentlessly, day by day, month by month. By 1934, The situation had become dire. Mao and the Red Army found themselves trapped, facing the grim specter of starvation and inevitable annihilation. The encirclement was complete, the odds insurmountable. In a desperate, audacious gamble for survival, they made the monumental decision to break out of the nationalist encirclement, to abandon their established base, and to embark upon an epic, unprecedented retreat. This was the genesis of what would become known to history as the Long March, a grueling, almost unimaginable trek that stretched for an entire year, testing the limits of human endurance and spirit. Around 86,000 soldiers and party members, with their meager belongings and an indomitable will, set out on this perilous journey. They marched tirelessly for over 6,000 miles, traversing some of China's most difficult, most treacherous, and most awe-inspiring terrain. Their path led them over the formidable, snow-capped mountains, their peaks piercing the sky, where the air was thin and biting cold. They navigated raging rivers, their currents swift and unforgiving, often without proper boats or bridges, relying on courage and ingenuity. They pushed through desolate grasslands, vast and empty, where the silence was broken only by the whistling wind, and where sustenance was scarce. All the while they were relentlessly pursued and bombed by the superior nationalist forces, a constant threat hanging over their heads. They fought dozens of desperate battles, often against overwhelming odds, their resolve unyielding. They faced the gnawing pangs of starvation, their bodies weakened by lack of food, and battled debilitating diseases that silently claimed many lives. The conditions were, quite simply, unimaginably harsh. Stories emerged of soldiers forced to strip the leather from their belts, and even their shoes, boiling and eating them, to stave off the crushing grip of hunger, a stark testament to their desperate will to survive. When, after a year of unimaginable suffering and relentless marching, they finally reached their destination in the northern province of Shanxi, fewer than 10,000 of the original 86,000 remained. The Long March was a crucible, a trial by fire that forged the Red Army into a cohesive, disciplined, and utterly determined force. It was during this monumental march, at a critical juncture in the remote town of Zuni, that a pivotal meeting of the party leadership took place. In this quiet yet intensely significant gathering, Mao Zedong, drawing upon his deep understanding of the practical realities on the ground and his unwavering conviction, voiced his sharp criticisms of the previous party leadership. He argued, with compelling logic, that his own strategies, particularly his focus on guerrilla warfare and mobilizing the peasantry, represented the only viable path forward for the survival and ultimate triumph of the revolution. His arguments resonated deeply with many, and at this meeting, Mao's influence and leadership within the party was significantly consolidated, marking a crucial shift in the trajectory. In 1937, a new and profoundly devastating chapter opened in China's long and troubled history. Japan launched a full-scale, brutal invasion, marking the beginning of what would eventually become World War II in Asia. The invasion was characterized by horrific atrocities, none more infamous than the Nanjing Massacre, a dark stain on human history. Faced with this common existential enemy, an enemy that threatened the very survival of the Chinese nation, the nationalist and communist parties, despite their deep-seated animosities and mutual suspicions, were compelled to form a united front. This alliance was at best fragile, constantly simmering with underlying distrust, yet it was a necessary collaboration in the face of overwhelming aggression. Chiang Kai-shek's main armies, better equipped and more conventionally structured, bore the brunt of the fighting in large-scale conventional battles, defending cities and vital infrastructure. Meanwhile, Mao, with his deep understanding of unconventional warfare, cleverly employed guerrilla tactics, masterfully harassing the Japanese enemy behind their lines, disrupting their supply routes, and tying down vast numbers of their troops in the sprawling countryside. Mao's guerrilla strategy proved to be highly effective, not only militarily, but also profoundly politically, as the nationalist government was forced to retreat deeper inland, losing major cities and crucial industrial centers to the advancing Japanese. The communists strategically expanded their influence in the vast rural areas. They were able to present themselves as the heroic, steadfast defenders of the Chinese people, tirelessly fighting the foreign aggressor. Their political organizers, working quietly and diligently in countless villages, implemented their policies of land reform, a promise that resonated deeply with the long-suffering peasantry. By redistributing land and improving the lives of ordinary farmers, the communists successfully won the widespread support and fierce loyalty of millions of peasants, forging a powerful, unbreakable bond. The long, brutal war against Japan, while devastating for the nation, ultimately exhausted and significantly weakened the nationalist government, which struggled with internal corruption and the immense burden of conventional warfare. Conversely, throughout this prolonged conflict, the Communist Party grew steadily stronger, larger, and significantly more popular than ever before, its roots deepening within the soil of the Chinese countryside, quietly preparing for the next decisive struggle. Once Japan finally surrendered in 1945, bringing an end to the brutal conflict of World War II, the fragile truce that had tenuously held the nationalists and communists together immediately shattered. The underlying tensions, long suppressed by the common enemy, erupted with full, devastating force, plunging China back into a desperate and all-consuming civil war. Initially, it appeared that the nationalists held a decisive advantage. They commanded a larger army, possessed superior weapons, and enjoyed the crucial support of the United States, providing them with significant material aid and diplomatic backing. However, beneath this seemingly formidable exterior, their government was deeply plagued by pervasive corruption, rampant hyperinflation that decimated the economy and the savings of ordinary people, and most critically, a growing lack of popular support among the populace. The people, weary of war and disillusioned by government inefficiency, yearned for stability and justice. In stark contrast, Mao's Red Army, now formally renamed the People's Liberation Army (PLA), was a force driven by a different kind of power. It was highly motivated, deeply disciplined, and perhaps most importantly, enjoyed the overwhelming and unwavering support of the peasantry, millions of whom saw their hopes for a better life vested in the communist cause. Utilizing brilliant military tactics, often characterized by strategic retreats, guerrilla ambushes, and encircling maneuvers, the PLA systematically defeated the larger nationalist armies in a series of decisive battles that swept across northern China. The balance of power, once seemingly tilted in favor of the nationalists, shifted irrevocably. The tide of the Civil War had turned decisively by 1949. The communist armies, a surging wave, swept southwards across the vast Chinese landscape, capturing city after city with surprisingly little resistance. The nationalist government, its armies collapsing in disarray and its legitimacy in tatters, crumbled completely, unable to withstand the relentless advance. Chiang Kai-shek, along with the remnants of his government and approximately 2 million of his most loyal followers, fled across the sea to the island of Taiwan, maintaining a defiant vow one day to return and reclaim the mainland. Back in Beijing, the communists, their victory now assured, were preparing to announce their triumph to the world, to usher in a new era for China, an era that would be profoundly shaped by the vision, the will, and the unwavering determination of Mao Zedong. The long night of war and division was drawing to a close, and a new dawn, filled with both promise and trepidation, was about to break over the ancient land. On the auspicious day of October 1st, 1949, a moment that would forever be etched into the annals of Chinese history. Mao Zedong stood atop the majestic gate of heavenly peace in Tiananmen Square, a place steeped in centuries of imperial tradition. Below him, stretching as far as the eye could see, was a massive, cheering crowd, their voices rising in a wave of euphoria and relief. In a voice that resonated with the weight of history and the promise of a new future, he solemnly declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. His now famous words, "The Chinese people have stood up," captured the immense collective sense of pride, the profound hope, and the deep, pervasive relief that swelled within the hearts of countless Chinese people. After more than a century of humiliation at the hands of foreign powers, of internal strife, and of devastating war, China was finally profoundly united under a strong, centralized government. For millions who had known nothing but grinding poverty, relentless insecurity, and the constant threat of famine, the promise of a new China brought a profound sense of hope for a better life, a life characterized by stability, national dignity, and renewed strength on the global stage. It was a moment of quiet triumph, a collective sigh of relief, marking the end of a long and arduous struggle, and the dawn of a new, ambitious era for the ancient nation. The newly established government, driven by a fervent desire to consolidate its control and fundamentally transform society, moved with remarkable speed and decisiveness. One of its very first, and undoubtedly most popular, policies was the implementation of a nationwide land reform program. Party workers, with their revolutionary zeal, fanned out into villages across the vast country. They systematically overthrew the long-entrenched landlord class, those who for centuries had held dominion over the land and the lives of the peasants. Land was confiscated from wealthy owners and meticulously redistributed to the poor peasants, those who had tilled the soil for generations but had never truly owned it. This deeply radical yet profoundly popular policy fulfilled a long-held promise, a dream passed down through countless generations, and in doing so, it secured the fierce, unwavering loyalty of hundreds of millions of peasants across the nation. For these humble farmers, receiving an official title deed for their own piece of land was not merely a bureaucratic transaction, it was a truly life-changing event, the realization of a centuries-old dream, a quiet revolution in their own lives. However, alongside these immensely popular reforms, the new state also began to reveal its authoritarian side, moving swiftly and decisively to eliminate any potential opposition, any voice that might challenge its absolute authority. Former nationalist officials, those who had served the previous regime, along with businessmen, intellectuals, and indeed anyone deemed counter-revolutionary or a potential threat to the new order, were systematically targeted. The party exerted tight control over the press, carefully shaping public opinion, and completely reshaped the educational system, indoctrinating the youth with its ideology. Public expression was rigorously policed, stifling dissent and fostering an atmosphere of cautious conformity. In this carefully constructed environment, a powerful cult of personality began to slowly but surely build around Chairman Mao, portraying him as the infallible savior of the nation, the guiding star of the revolution. China, indeed, had stood up on the world stage, asserting its independence and dignity. Yet within its borders, individual freedom was increasingly compelled to yield to the collective will, subsumed by the overarching authority of the state and the party, a quiet exchange of personal liberty for collective strength. By the late 1950s, a sense of growing impatience began to stir within Mao Zedong. He felt that the pace of change, despite the initial dramatic transformations, was simply too slow, too measured for his grand vision. He harbored an ambitious, almost utopian dream to rapidly transform China this vast ancient agricultural nation into a modern industrial superpower, not over decades, but in a compressed span of mere years. His ambition was boundless, his will unyielding. In 1958, driven by this fervent desire for accelerated progress, he launched a monumental campaign that would forever be known as the Great Leap Forward. The core of this audacious plan involved mobilizing the entire population, harnessing the collective energy and labor of hundreds of millions of people towards a singular goal. Central to this transformation was the radical reorganization of the countryside. Private farming, a practice as old as civilization itself, was completely abolished. Peasants, who for generations had worked their own small plots, were now compelled to surrender their individual lands and tools, to merge their labor and their destinies, and to join vast peoples' communes. These communes were massive collective units, designed to pool resources and labor for maximum efficiency, at least in theory. The second, equally ambitious, component of the Great Leap Forward aggressively pushed for a dramatic surge in industrial production, with a particular emphasis on steel. Mao, in his vision, saw steel as the ultimate metric of a nation's industrial might, the tangible symbol of modernization. In an almost unprecedented move, he ordered the construction of millions of rudimentary backyard furnaces in villages and city neighborhoods across the entire country. Everyone was mobilized: farmers, teachers, doctors, students, even the elderly were pressed into service, urged to contribute to the national effort. They melted down pots and pans, door hinges, precious farming tools, and whatever scrap metal they could find, often using inefficient, makeshift methods. The aim, driven by fervent political slogans and unrealistic targets, was breathtakingly ambitious: to surpass Great Britain's industrial output in an incredibly short time frame. The entire country became gripped by a feverish frenzy of activity, fueled by intense political pressure, utopian promises of a glorious future, and a collective belief in the power of human will to overcome all obstacles. However, despite the immense effort and fervent enthusiasm, the results of the Great Leap Forward were nothing short of catastrophic. The millions of backyard furnaces, crudely constructed and inefficiently operated, produced vast quantities of useless lumps of metal, often of inferior quality, while simultaneously wasting enormous amounts of precious fuel and irreplaceable labor. Millions of skilled farmers, crucial for agricultural production, were pulled away from the fields to participate in these misguided industrial efforts, leaving crops untended and harvests ungathered. The newly formed communes, often poorly managed by inexperienced party cadres, struggled with organizational inefficiencies and a profound lack of understanding of agricultural science. Without the personal incentives of private ownership, food production plummeted dramatically. Adding to the tragedy, local officials, desperate to please their superiors and meet impossible quotas, wildly exaggerated harvest figures, reporting bumper crops that simply did not exist. Based on these fabricated statistics, the state proceeded to seize huge amounts of grain for cities and for export, leaving the peasants, those who had actually produced the food, with almost nothing to sustain themselves. What followed was one of the worst famines in recorded human history, a period of immense, widespread suffering and unimaginable loss. From 1959 to 1962, China plunged into a devastating period of starvation. People, desperate for sustenance, resorted to eating tree bark, meticulously stripping leaves from trees, and scavenging whatever meager, edible items they could possibly find in the barren landscape. The government, in a tragic attempt to maintain face and control information, initially blamed bad weather for the widespread food shortages, while simultaneously striving to hide the true scale of the disaster from both its own people and the outside world. However, the undeniable grim reality was that the catastrophic famine was a direct, man-made consequence of the deeply flawed and aggressively implemented policies of the Great Leap Forward. It is estimated, with chilling precision, that between 20 and 45 million people perished during this period, a staggering human cost. What had begun as an optimistic utopian vision, fueled by grand ambitions and revolutionary fervor, tragically transformed into an unimaginable human tragedy, a profound and sobering warning about the perils of radical utopianism, unchecked centralized power, and the disastrous consequences of divorcing policy from reality. The silence of the suffering, the quiet despair of millions became a profound testament to the fragility of grand designs when untethered from human needs. In the wake of the catastrophic failure of the Great Leap Forward, Mao Zedong's immense prestige, once unassailable, was severely damaged. The scale of the famine, though officially downplayed, was too vast to be entirely concealed, and whispers of its horrors reached even the highest echelons of power. In response to this profound setback, Mao for a time stepped back from the day-to-day administrative rule, retreating somewhat from the direct oversight of the nation's affairs. This created a vacuum that was cautiously filled by more pragmatic, moderate leaders within the party, notably Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping. These individuals, recognizing the dire state of the economy and the immense suffering of the people, introduced a series of practical, recovery-oriented policies. They cautiously allowed for the reintroduction of small private plots of land, giving peasants a personal incentive to produce food, and gradually dismantled parts of the commune system, recognizing its profound inefficiencies. Under these more sensible, measured approaches, the economy slowly began to recover, and a semblance of normalcy, a quiet return to more traditional ways of life, started to return to the beleaguered nation. However, for Mao, who had poured his entire being into the revolutionary vision, this shift towards moderation and pragmatism was perceived not as a necessary correction, but as a profound betrayal of core revolutionary principles. He viewed these changes with deep suspicion, fearing that the burgeoning bureaucracy and the reintroduction of market elements would inevitably lead China back down the path of capitalism, away from the pure socialist ideals he championed. He became increasingly convinced that a new revolution was not only desirable, but absolutely essential to purge the party and society of these perceived deviations, and to rekindle the revolutionary fervor he believed was waning. And so, in 1966, driven by this profound conviction, and a desire to reassert his authority and ideological purity, Mao launched yet another monumental, and ultimately devastating, campaign: the Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution. With a stirring yet ominous call, he urged the youth of China to bombard the headquarters, to rise up against party officials who in his eyes had become stagnant and bourgeois. He explicitly targeted old ideas, old culture, old customs and old habits, seeking to dismantle the very foundations of traditional Chinese society and intellectual life. Millions of fervent students, captivated by Mao's charismatic appeal and empowered by his revolutionary mandate, formed paramilitary groups known as the Red Guards. Unleashed and emboldened, these young zealots rampaged across the country, embarking on a decade-long period of profound terror and social upheaval. The Cultural Revolution plunged China into an era of unprecedented chaos and suffering. The Red Guards publicly humiliated teachers, subjected countless individuals to brutal torture, and in some tragic instances, even killed their victims. The targets of their relentless zeal included not only teachers and school administrators, but also respected intellectuals, government officials, and even, shockingly, their own parents, if they were deemed to embody old ideas. Temples, ancient and sacred, were wantonly destroyed, their spiritual significance erased. Priceless ancient artworks were smashed, their historical and cultural value irrevocably lost. Books, repositories of centuries of wisdom and knowledge, were senselessly burned, their contents vanishing into smoke. Countless artifacts, treasures of China's rich past, were either destroyed or simply lost forever. High-ranking officials, even those who had been close to Mao, such as Liu Shaoqi, were ruthlessly purged, publicly denounced, and subjected to harsh persecution. People were imprisoned on the flimsiest of pretexts, their lives irrevocably shattered. No one was truly safe. A careless comment, the discovery of a foreign book, or even a distant family tie to someone deemed undesirable, could lead to severe persecution, imprisonment, or even death. Schools and universities across the nation closed their doors for years, effectively creating a lost generation of young people whose education was tragically disrupted. As the initial fervor waned, the Red Guards themselves became fractured, with rival factions fighting one another in increasingly violent clashes, pushing China dangerously close to the brink of full-scale civil war. The economy, already fragile from previous upheavals, stalled completely, and the very fabric of society was torn apart by suspicion, fear, and violence. Eventually, Mao was compelled to call in the army to restore some semblance of order, sending many of the most zealous Red Guards to the countryside for re-education. While the most intense chaos began to ease by 1969, the pervasive turmoil and its devastating effects continued to ripple through Chinese society until Mao's death in 1976. The Cultural Revolution left an indelible mark, a profound national trauma that shattered countless lives, extinguished individual spirits, and inflicted deep, lasting wounds on the cultural and social landscape of China. It stands as a somber testament to the destructive power of ideological extremism and the devastating consequences of unchecked political fervor, a quiet, lingering ache in the heart of a nation. Mao Zedong, the architect of a new China and the catalyst for such profound transformations and immense suffering, passed away on September 9, 1976. He had ruled China for an extraordinary 27 years, a period that witnessed the nation's rebirth and its greatest challenges. His death marked, unequivocally, the end of an era, leaving behind a country profoundly transformed in its structure and its aspirations, but also, in equal measure, deeply scarred by the turbulent path it had traversed under his leadership. The legacy he bequeathed to China and to the world is complex, monumental, and fiercely debated, a tapestry woven with threads of triumph and tragedy, of liberation and repression. On one hand, he is widely and justly credited with unifying a nation that had been fractured and fragmented for over a century, tormented by internal strife and external aggression. He is celebrated for ending the century of humiliation, that long period when foreign powers dictated terms to China, effectively diminishing its sovereignty. Through his leadership, foreign powers were ultimately driven out, and China, once weak and subjugated, emerged as a strong, independent nation on the world stage, asserting its rightful place among global powers. For these monumental achievements, he is revered by many as the great unifier, the revered founder of modern China, the leader who restored its dignity and strength. Under his rule, literacy rates in China rose dramatically, opening the doors of knowledge to millions who had previously been denied. Life expectancy nearly doubled, a testament to significant advancements in public hygiene and the provision of basic health care to the vast population. Furthermore, the status of women, traditionally marginalized in Chinese society, was significantly elevated through new laws and expanded opportunities, encapsulated in his famous declaration that women hold up half the sky. For these undeniable achievements, Many Chinese, particularly older generations, continue to hold him in deep reverence, viewing him as a pivotal figure who truly changed their lives for the better. His iconic portrait still hangs majestically over the Gate of Heavenly Peace in Tiananmen Square, a powerful symbol of the nation's founding, and his body lies interred in a mausoleum, perpetual symbols of his enduring, albeit controversial, presence in the national consciousness. However, this narrative of positive transformation and national triumph stands in stark and somber contrast with the immense suffering that resulted from his more radical and often ill-conceived policies. The political purges, which systematically eliminated perceived enemies and critics, the man-made famine of the Great Leap Forward that claimed tens of millions of lives, and the brutal chaos of the Cultural Revolution that tore apart society, collectively resulted in the deaths of truly tens of millions of people. His rule, while building a powerful state, also destroyed vast swathes of traditional Chinese culture, dismantled the nascent economy during periods of ideological fervor, and subjected ordinary people to a pervasive atmosphere of political terror and constant fear. This dark, tragic side of his legacy is often downplayed or even censored within China, a difficult chapter that the official narrative seeks to carefully manage. But for millions of Chinese people, the memory of Mao Zedong is inextricably linked with profound pain, immense loss, and deep-seated tragedy. Today, the official verdict of the Communist Party of China on Mao Zedong is a carefully calibrated assessment: 70% good, 30% bad. This nuanced judgment attempts to separate his early unifying achievements from his later catastrophic mistakes, allowing for a continuity of the party's rule while simultaneously moving away from his more chaotic